Ethan stared at the glowing horizon of the colony planet, his heart thumping in ways he hadn't felt in years. The twin suns were dipping below jagged mountain peaks, scattering shades of violet and gold across the sky. From the distance, the palace shimmered like it was alive, walls made of reflective crystal that pulsed with soft light. Humans had only colonized this world a few decades ago, yet somehow they had built a place that seemed to breathe. Or maybe it was the alien presence inside that gave it life. Tonight, Ethan was to marry Lyra, a woman he barely knew, a Zareth noble from a line that stretched back centuries. Humans had been warned that Zareth nobility was proud, complex, and often unfathomable. And yet here he was, walking toward the palace, wearing a ceremonial robe that shimmered like liquid silver, feeling like a child dressed for a festival meant for kings. The palace gates opened silently, welcoming them with a warm pulse of light. Ethan walked in, nerves knotting his stomach. The main hall was enormous, stretching as far as the eye could see. Crystalline pillars rose like trees, casting fractal shadows across the floor. Guests from both human and Zareth worlds mingled, exchanging greetings that Ethan could barely understand. Some spoke in the melodic Zareth tongue, others in careful, clipped English, trying to bridge worlds that had never fully met before. Lyra was waiting at the center of the hall. Ethan caught his first clear look at her and stopped in his tracks. She was taller than most humans, her skin a smooth lavender hue, with eyes that seemed to glow softly from within. Her hair cascaded down her back in a wave of silver light that seemed almost liquid. She wore a ceremonial gown that shifted color depending on the angle of the light, blending blues, greens, and silvers into a moving tapestry. Yet it was her presence, the way she carried herself, that froze him more than her appearance. There was authority in her posture and the calmness of her gaze. She did not simply walk, she commanded the space around her. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, rich, and almost musical. "You look ready." Ethan and Lyra moved through the motions, exchanging words that were meant to bind their fates, and yet Ethan felt like he was learning a foreign dance without a teacher. When the final words were spoken and the lights of the palace dimmed, the crowd departed quietly. Ethan and Lyra were left alone in the grand ceremonial hall, which now felt empty and silent. The crystal walls reflected the dim lights like stars trapped in glass. Ethan's heart beat fast, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. Lyra turned to him and said, "Tonight is when our bond becomes more than ceremony. It is when we share truths." "Truths?" he asked. Lyra nodded, stepping closer. "I will not hide anything from you, Ethan. I will be honest." She took a deep breath, her glowing eyes fixed on his, unwavering. Then she said words that would change his understanding of everything. "I am a queen." He had known she was noble, yes, but a queen? A real queen? Someone who ruled, who commanded armies, who had the authority to shape worlds. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on him. He looked at her, trying to read her expression, trying to find a hint that she was joking, but there was none, only certainty. "A queen?" he asked finally, his voice barely more than a whisper. Lyra inclined her head. "Yes, by right of lineage, by duty, by choice. I do not claim it lightly." Lyra moved to sit beside him. She did not take his hand, not yet, but her presence was closer than proximity. It was almost gravitational. "I do not expect you to understand everything tonight," she said softly. "I only ask that you try. You are human, yes, but humans have strengths that we Zareth often fail to see. Adaptability, creativity, courage, qualities that could change the fate of worlds. That is why you were chosen. That is why the Council permitted this union. That is why I permitted it, and that is why it is dangerous. Some will seek to end it or end you. And you're counting on me to survive." He had imagined that marrying an alien would be strange, perhaps exotic, but he had never imagined that he would be thrust into a position of importance this quickly. And yet, there was a spark inside him, a surge of confidence, fueled by the recognition that humans, often underestimated, could rise to challenges even the greatest alien civilizations could not predict. The room shifted subtly. The crystal walls pulsed brighter, and Ethan realized they responded to Lyra's presence or perhaps her emotions. He looked at her, feeling the enormity of what it meant to be beside someone who commanded such living architecture. Yet even in the shadow of her power, he felt capable, perhaps even essential. Lyra's voice drew him back. "Ethan, there is one more thing you must know tonight." She leaned closer, her tone soft but firm. "You will not be alone in this. I am yours as much as you are mine. But this bond, it is not just for affection. It is for survival. It is for change. And if you fail, everything you know may collapse. Humans thrived in adversity. That had always been their way. And if he could survive this night, perhaps he could survive what was coming. For hours they talked. Not just words of ceremony, not the polite exchanges of a marriage, but truths. Lyra revealed fragments of Zareth history, empires that had risen and fallen because they refused to adapt, wars fought over protocol instead of reason, betrayals that reshaped planets. Ethan shared stories of human resilience, of ingenuity in crises, of survival against impossible odds. And slowly, the room felt less alien, more like a shared space of understanding. When dawn approached, the twin suns barely rising above the horizon, Ethan understood something profound. He had not married merely a woman. He had married a universe of power, history, and responsibility. And she had not chosen him because of what he was now, but because of what he could become. Lyra stood, her gown shimmering in the soft light, and for the first time Ethan felt a spark of hope. "Rest now, Ethan," she said, her voice softer than before. "Tomorrow, the world begins to change, and you will help me shape it." He was a partner to a queen, a participant in a union that could alter the course of civilizations. Fear remained, yes, but it was tempered by purpose, and a quiet determination settled in his chest. He closed his eyes, listening to the gentle hum of the palace, alive with light and power. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The morning light spilled through the palace windows, painting the hall in soft shades of violet and silver. Ethan awoke slowly, the previous night's revelations pressing on him like a weight he could not yet lift. The memory of Lyra's words, "I am a queen," echoed in his mind. He sat up on the crystalline bed, staring around at the living palace, still struggling to comprehend the life he had entered. Every wall seemed to pulse, the corridors twisting subtly as if aware of his presence. It was beautiful, alien, and slightly unnerving. Lyra was already awake. She stood near the window, gazing at the twin suns rising above the horizon. Her hair shimmered in the light, flowing like liquid silver, and her eyes glowed softly with the calm certainty of one who commanded everything around her. She turned as Ethan stirred. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, her voice smooth yet powerful. "Sleep well." "As well as a man can, waking up married to a queen on a planet that seems alive." He tried to joke, but it came out more as a nervous chuckle. Lyra's lips curved in a small smile. "This world may seem alive, but it is merely a reflection of what it has become over centuries of careful attention. My people built it to respond, to adapt. And now you live within it." Lyra approached him, her hands brushing against his arm lightly, almost imperceptibly. "Come," she said. "It is time you understand the life you have joined. Today you will meet those who will not accept you and those who may become allies. You must learn quickly, Ethan." Ethan felt the subtle hum beneath his feet, like the building itself was alive. As they entered a large hall, a group of Zareth nobles waited. Their expressions ranged from polite curiosity to thinly veiled disdain. Humans, they seemed to think, did not belong here. Lyra's posture changed subtly, becoming taller, more commanding. Ethan noticed how the room seemed to respond, the crystals glowing brighter as if attuned to her authority. "This is the council," she said softly. "They will guide you, challenge you, and test you. Watch carefully, learn." Ethan felt the weight of their scrutiny. He had faced tough negotiators, hardened warriors, and demanding leaders before, but there was something different here, a cold, precise expectation that humans would fail. One noble, tall with deep blue skin and eyes like molten gold, stepped forward. "So this is the human?" he asked, voice smooth but edged with doubt. "The one who has been chosen to marry our queen." Teach a Zareth council anything. Humans were often underestimated. Perhaps that was exactly what this palace needed. The council began their tests subtly. They presented scenarios, hypotheticals, questions designed to probe his thinking. How would he resolve conflicts between planets? How would he address a crisis of resources? How would he negotiate with a species whose laws defied logic? Ethan thought carefully. He did not know everything about Zareth society, but he relied on what humans excelled at: improvisation, ethics, and the ability to think under pressure. He answered calmly, explaining how he would prioritize safety, diplomacy, and ingenuity. Some nobles frowned, others exchanged glances, unsure what to make of his answers. "You see," Lyra whispered as they walked through the hall later. "Humans think differently. Where we hesitate, you act. Where we follow, you adapt. That is strength. But first, you must understand our weaknesses as well as our strengths. Only then can you survive and influence us." He noticed patterns others overlooked. minor flaws in the energy conduits, inconsistencies in protocol, and the subtle ways Zareth relied on rigid hierarchies instead of practical solutions. As they passed through the corridors, Ethan overheard whispers from servants and lesser nobles. "The human will fail," one said. "No outsider can survive the Queen's world." "Ethan," she said, "there are forces within my court that will see your presence as a threat. Some will attempt to manipulate you, isolate you, even endanger you. You must remain vigilant. They value protocol over reason, tradition over innovation. Humans can see solutions we cannot. You are unpredictable, you are flexible, and yes, you have courage. These qualities may be the only things that save us both." Instead, it was a partnership, a dangerous, vital partnership where his choices could affect entire civilizations. The day progressed with lessons, exercises, and introductions. Ethan learned to read subtle telepathic cues, recognize signals of influence, and understand the hierarchy of the court. Every step he took, every action he made was scrutinized. Yet he also discovered allies, Zareth nobles and attendants who were curious about humans, who admired courage and quick thinking. During one exercise, a minor energy conduit failed, threatening to collapse part of the palace floor. The nobles panicked, unsure how to respond, relying on complex protocols that only slowed them down. Ethan acted quickly, using a combination of observation, improvisation, and human ingenuity. He rigged a temporary solution using materials on hand, stabilizing the floor until a proper repair could be made. The council watched in silence, some shock registering in their expressions. Lyra's eyes gleamed with approval. "See," she whispered, "humans adapt where we hesitate. That is the difference between survival and failure." As night fell, Lyra stood beside him once more, their hands brushing briefly. "Tomorrow, you will face your first true test," she said. "Not a simulation, not a hypothetical, but reality. There are those who will attempt to manipulate, deceive, or harm you. You must see clearly, act decisively, and trust in your human strengths. Remember, Ethan, chaos can be an ally if wielded wisely." Humans thrived in adversity, and this palace, with all its alien splendor and peril, was the greatest challenge he had ever faced. As he lay down to rest, he thought of the coming day. He would meet resistance, witness treachery, and perhaps face danger that no human had encountered before. And yet he felt a spark of something new, confidence born not of arrogance, but of purpose. He had married a queen, yes, but he had also married the possibility to change a civilization. And perhaps in doing so, he would prove that humans were more than outsiders. They were survivors, innovators, and partners to power. The palace hummed softly around him, the crystals glowing faintly like stars. Ethan closed his eyes, readying himself for the trials that awaited. Tomorrow, the true test would begin, and he, a human, would rise to meet it. The next morning arrived with a strange calm, as if the palace itself held its breath. Ethan rose early, still adjusting to the weight of being married to someone whose authority could command armies and shape planets. His body ached slightly from yesterday's lessons and exercises, but his mind was alert, ready for the challenges Lyra had promised. He dressed quickly, the ceremonial robe still clinging to him like a reminder that his life had changed forever. Lyra was already waiting in the main hall. She stood with her usual composure, a queen in every sense, yet there was a faint tension in her eyes. The palace walls shimmered softly, almost as if they could sense what was coming. "Ethan," she said, "today you will meet those who will either help you or try to break you. Observe carefully. Your survival depends on understanding intentions, not just words." But he also knew that nothing could fully prepare him for what was coming. The palace corridors twisted as they walked, glowing softly in response to their presence. Ethan noticed subtle glances from servants, shifts in posture from nobles, and whispered murmurs in the Zareth tongue. It was a complex game of observation and understanding, one he had to master quickly. They entered a chamber where several nobles awaited, seated around a floating table made of translucent crystal. The room hummed with quiet energy, the air thick with anticipation. Ethan could feel the eyes of the council on him, judging, testing, measuring every small movement. One noble, his skin a deep cobalt blue with golden eyes, spoke first. "So the human has come to learn the ways of Zareth power," he said, voice smooth but edged with doubt. "Do you understand what it means to enter this council, to speak among those whose families have ruled for centuries?" "I do not claim to know everything, but I promise to act with thought, respect, and diligence." They presented him with complex scenarios, territorial disputes, resource shortages, and ethical dilemmas that had challenged their civilization for generations. Each situation was layered with history, protocol, and subtle traps designed to test his understanding and judgment. Ethan listened carefully, observing the subtle reactions of each noble, the flicker of emotion in their telepathic cues, the small gestures that revealed intent. When it was his turn to respond, Ethan relied on what humans excelled at: logic, creativity, and the ability to improvise. He suggested solutions that were unconventional yet practical, and explained his reasoning clearly. Some nobles frowned, others looked surprised, unsure how to respond. "You think too simply," one elder said, his voice sharp. "Our civilization does not survive on simplicity." "See," she whispered to him later, "humans adapt where we hesitate, that is strength." Perhaps he could influence this world not through power but through insight and action. After the council session, Lyra led him to a private corridor. "There is more than what you saw today," she said. "Some of my people will attempt to undermine you. Others will test your loyalty. You must be vigilant." "Why choose a human for this? Partnership. Only someone outside our rigid system can see its weaknesses and help us grow stronger. No outsider can navigate the Queen's world." Later, they entered a training chamber, a large space filled with holographic simulations of crises and challenges. Ethan had to navigate these trials using both human ingenuity and his understanding of Zareth culture. One simulation involved a territorial dispute between two colonies on the planet, where each side relied heavily on tradition and protocol. The Zareth approach was slow, cautious, and bound by rules, while Ethan proposed solutions based on observation, negotiation, and contingency planning. The simulations became increasingly complex, testing his ability to think under pressure. He found that Zareth systems were brilliant but rigid, and that their reliance on hierarchy often slowed decision-making. In contrast, humans thrived in chaos, capable of improvising, learning quickly, and finding solutions others would overlook. Lyra observed quietly, noting every decision he made. "You see, Ethan," she said later, "humans are underestimated because they are unpredictable. That unpredictability can be a weapon if used wisely." He had survived disasters before, but this was different. Here, his actions could influence not only his survival, but the perception of humans across the galaxy. Every choice, every solution was a test of ingenuity and courage. As the day progressed, Ethan began to notice subtle patterns in the palace's hierarchy. Certain nobles had hidden motives, alliances formed in secret, and others sought to manipulate events to their advantage. He realized that survival here required more than intelligence. It required careful observation, understanding, and at times, bold action. During a break, Lyra led him to a balcony overlooking the city. The twin suns reflected off the glassy towers below, and Ethan felt a sense of awe. "This world is beautiful," he said, "but dangerous. I see now that marrying you was never going to be simple." That is when your human strengths will matter most. He was not just learning about Zareth culture. He was learning about himself and about the potential humans held when underestimated by those who believed themselves superior. As evening fell, the palace shifted subtly. Hallways elongated, walls pulsed with soft light, and distant chambers echoed with activity. Ethan sensed tension, as if the palace itself was aware of the political maneuvering and hidden dangers that lay ahead. Lyra led him to a private chamber, her expression serious. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will face the Council's ultimate test, not a simulation, not a practice, but a real situation that will challenge your judgment, loyalty, and courage. Some will try to deceive you, others to manipulate you. You must act decisively, using both observation and intuition." He would need to demonstrate his worth, not only to Lyra, but to the Zareth Council, whose approval or disapproval could shape the future of humans in this galaxy. He lay down to rest, the palace humming softly around him. He thought about the coming day, about the hidden agendas and the subtle challenges that awaited. He felt fear, yes, but also determination. Humans thrived under pressure, and he would prove that their unpredictability, courage, and ingenuity were forces to be reckoned with. And as he drifted into sleep, he realized something profound. This was not just a marriage. This was a partnership, a challenge, and a test of human potential. The council, the nobles, and even the palace itself would not easily accept him, but he would show them that humans could survive, adapt, and even thrive in a world that underestimated them. Tomorrow, the true challenges would begin. And Ethan, human and yet more than any outsider expected, would rise to meet them. The palace was restless that morning. Ethan awoke to a faint hum beneath the crystal floors, a subtle vibration that suggested more than the building's usual activity. It felt as if the palace itself knew today would be dangerous. He dressed quickly, nerves tingling with anticipation. Lyra was already waiting, her posture calm but alert, radiating authority in a way that made every hallway they passed seem smaller, controlled. "You will need focus today," she said. "The Council's true intentions will become clear. Some of them will attempt to manipulate you. Others may try to harm you. You must observe, analyze, and act without hesitation." Survival here required not just intelligence. It required vigilance, courage, and the ability to think faster than anyone else in the room. They entered the council chamber, where the Zareth nobles sat waiting, expressions cold and calculating. The hum of energy from the walls seemed louder today, as if the palace itself was aware of the tension. Ethan noticed subtle gestures, small hand movements, the way their eyes flicked toward one another, signals that indicated alliances and hidden intentions. The head of the council, a stern figure with silver skin and eyes like molten amber, spoke first. "Human, you have observed our customs and traditions. You have participated in simulations, but now you will face a real scenario. A problem with consequences. One mistake could cost more than your reputation. It could cost lives." It showed a distant colony on the edge of the planet, where a severe energy disruption had caused instability in the life support systems. Civilians were at risk, and the council had been paralyzed, debating protocol instead of acting. "You must devise a solution," the council head said. "Fast, effective, and within the laws of Zareth governance. Failure is not an option. Prioritize stabilization of life support first. Secondary measures, like energy rerouting and communication restoration, can follow. I propose a temporary manual override using local resources until the main system can be repaired." One elder spoke sharply. "You suggest ignoring established law. The consequences of overstepping authority could be catastrophic." She did not intervene, letting him face the council on his own. Yet her presence beside him radiated support, a subtle but powerful reminder that he was not alone. The council debated among themselves, voices rising and falling, but Ethan noticed the subtle signs of uncertainty. Even the most rigid nobles hesitated. For the first time, human adaptability and decisive thinking had unsettled them. Ethan continued, "I will lead a team personally. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the will to act. Delaying further increases the risk. We must act now. We adapt, we solve, and we survive. This colony will not suffer because we hesitated. That is what we do. But be warned, failure reflects not only on you, but on the queen who supports you." Ethan quickly assessed the situation, giving clear instructions to stabilize the colony. The engineers worked efficiently, following his guidance, though some glanced at him with surprise. Humans were not supposed to act so decisively in Zareth crises. As they worked, Ethan noticed subtle sabotage attempts, equipment tampered with, minor systems disrupted. Someone within the palace or the colony had tried to complicate the situation, perhaps hoping to discredit him. His eyes narrowed and he signaled to Lyra. "They are testing us," he said quietly. "Someone wants us to fail to make this look like incompetence. Watch for patterns, check redundancies. Humans often notice details we overlook. That is why you were chosen." The engineers followed his lead, impressed by his ingenuity. By the end of the crisis, the colony was stable. Civilians were safe, systems functioning. Ethan had acted decisively, using his human strengths to succeed where rigid tradition might have failed. Back at the palace, the council awaited news. Ethan presented the results succinctly, highlighting the successful stabilization and the challenges overcome. Some nobles remained skeptical, while others exchanged impressed glances. The head of the council studied him silently, then finally said, "You have performed beyond expectations. Your methods are unconventional but effective. The colony is safe." Ethan realized he had gained a foothold, a measure of respect in a world that had doubted him. Yet the victory was not complete. As they walked through the palace corridors later, Ethan noticed subtle movements in the shadows, nobles whispering in secret chambers, attendants glancing nervously. The palace was alive with intrigue, and not all of it friendly. Lyra placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Do you understand now?" she asked. This palace, my people, the council, they are not obstacles to overcome lightly. Every success is observed, every action weighed. You are learning, yes, but the real challenge is yet to come. Our ability to improvise, to act under pressure, to think differently, it matters. Together, we can shape what comes next. As evening fell, Ethan and Lyra stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights glimmered in the crystal towers, the twin suns dipping below the horizon. The palace hummed softly beneath them, alive with power and secrets. Tomorrow will be more difficult, Lyra said. The council will attempt to manipulate events to test your loyalty and judgment. You will see the true weight of being human in a world built on centuries of rules and hierarchy. But remember, humans endure, adapt, and act where others hesitate. Then we face it together, he said firmly. I will not fail, not now, not ever. If humans are underestimated, that is their mistake. We can endure anything. And you, human, will show them the strength that lies in unpredictability and courage. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and here, in the heart of an alien civilization, he would prove that even the smallest human mind could influence the fate of worlds. And as the night settled over the palace, he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning broke with a tension that felt heavier than any Ethan had experienced. The palace seemed quieter than usual, the corridors smooth and reflective, almost as if they were holding their breath. Ethan dressed carefully, moving with purpose. Today would test everything he had learned. Today, the council, the nobles, and the hidden enemies within the palace would act, and survival would demand every ounce of human ingenuity and courage. Lyra waited in the grand hall, her eyes sharp and focused. The faint glow from her skin reflected the light of the twin suns, making her appear more commanding than ever. Ethan, she said, this is the day you will see the true intentions of those who oppose us. The council will attempt to manipulate events, to isolate us, to test your loyalty. You must act decisively. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, and trust me. They entered the council chamber. The nobles were assembled, their faces formal, but their eyes glinting with suspicion and veiled hostility. The air in the room vibrated with tension, and Ethan felt the subtle movements of the walls, the soft hum of energy that suggested the palace itself was aware of the coming conflict. The council head spoke first, his voice calm but sharp. Human, you have learned, adapted, and performed admirably. Yet today, your judgment will be tested in a situation where lives, power, and loyalty are at stake. Fail, and the consequences will be yours and the Queen's. It displayed multiple colonies under threat, one facing a failing energy grid, another experiencing political unrest, and a third at risk from rogue mercenaries exploiting the instability. The nobles exchanged subtle glances, each calculating how they might manipulate the situation for advantage. You must act, the head of the council said. Your choices will determine the outcome. He would have to combine speed with ingenuity, but also diplomacy. He could not alienate the very people whose cooperation he would need. He began outlining a plan. We deploy teams simultaneously, he said, pointing at the projected colonies. Prioritize immediate threats first. Assign liaison officers to coordinate with local authorities. Use temporary manual overrides for failing systems. Deploy negotiators to manage unrest and security teams to contain the mercenaries. Communication and observation will be constant. We adapt as situations evolve. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but resonant. He speaks with clarity and judgment. The human's adaptability is exactly what we need. Observe how he addresses complexity. He does not rely solely on protocol, but on insight and action. They were used to predictable outcomes, and a human acting with both courage and reason had unsettled them. Ethan signaled to the engineers and liaisons, who quickly assembled at the chamber doors. Together, he and Lyra coordinated the response. Ethan improvised solutions when traditional methods failed, combining human flexibility with Zareth technology. A critical moment arrived when the energy grid in the largest colony began to collapse. The Zareth engineers hesitated, uncertain which protocol to follow. Ethan acted without delay. He directed teams to manually stabilize the grid using unconventional methods, rerouted excess power from smaller colonies, and patched failing conduits with improvised solutions. One of the council nobles, a tall figure with deep purple skin, whispered to another, clearly expecting disaster. But Ethan's plan succeeded. The energy grid stabilized, preventing a catastrophic collapse. Meanwhile, political unrest in another colony threatened to spiral into violence. Ethan dispatched negotiators, instructing them to combine empathy with decisive action. Using his understanding of human psychology, he guided the negotiators to de-escalate tensions and implement temporary reforms until more permanent solutions could be introduced. At the same time, rogue mercenaries had breached a lightly defended colony. Ethan coordinated security teams, using clever diversions, misdirection, and rapid improvisation to trap the mercenaries without unnecessary loss of life. By the time the Council's own forces intervened, the situation was under control. The chamber was quiet as the Council observed the results. Colonies stabilized, civilians safe, threats neutralized. Some nobles exchanged stunned glances, others whispered among themselves, unable to deny the humans' effectiveness. Lyra's eyes gleamed with approval. "You see," she said, "humans act where others hesitate. Where we rely on protocol, they improvise. Where we calculate endlessly, they execute decisively. That is why unpredictability is strength." Later, as he and Lyra walked through the palace corridors, Ethan noticed subtle movements in hidden chambers, nobles whispering, attendants exchanging hurried glances. The palace was alive with intrigue, and not all of it friendly. Yet, for the first time, he felt confident that human ingenuity and courage could influence events, even in a civilization far older and more powerful than his own. Lyra paused, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "You understand now," she said, "why humans were chosen, not because of strength or lineage, but because of courage, creativity, and the ability to act decisively in moments of uncertainty. You have proven yourself today. There will be challenges greater than these, and I must remain vigilant. I will not fail." Courage, insight, adaptability, qualities they cannot easily understand. Humans were no longer seen as mere outsiders. They were capable partners, capable of influencing the fate of civilizations. Ethan moved among the guests, observing the subtle shifts in hierarchy. He noticed alliances forming around him, cautious whispers of approval, and even some nobles quietly advocating for greater cooperation with humans. Lyra stood beside him, regal and commanding, yet clearly proud of the human she had chosen. As the assembly concluded, Ethan and Lyra stepped onto the palace balcony. The city stretched out before them, glimmering towers reflecting the twin suns, and a sense of calm finally settled over the palace. The day had been perilous, but it had proven a truth Ethan had always known. Humans, when underestimated, could achieve remarkable feats. "Ethan," Lyra said softly, "the Council has learned something today. So have I. Humans are unpredictable, courageous, and capable of remarkable insight. Together, we can shape this civilization, challenge tradition, and face threats that no one else could manage. And humans will rise to meet them, just as they always have. And together, we will prove that courage, creativity, and adaptability can alter the course of worlds." As the twin suns set, casting long shadows across the city, Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had faced the Council, navigated danger, and proved that humans could act where others hesitated. He had learned the value of observation, ingenuity, and courage in a world far older and more complex than his own. And as the night settled over the palace, he knew that this was only the first step of many. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, threats, and possibilities. But with Lyra beside him, and with the unique strengths of humanity, he was ready to face whatever came next. The Council had witnessed his capabilities. The nobles had begun to respect him. And most importantly, Lyra, a queen in every sense, had placed her trust in him, not just as a husband, but as a partner in leadership, strategy, and survival. Ethan felt a quiet confidence, a deep understanding of what it meant to be human in a world that often underestimated them. Humans were not weak. Humans could endure, adapt, and triumph. And together with Lyra, he would ensure that their union not only survived, but reshaped the future of civilizations. As he looked out at the city lights twinkling across the horizon, Ethan realized that this marriage had become more than personal. It had become legendary. Together, he and Lyra would face the universe, human ingenuity matched with alien authority, ready to confront challenges that no one else could endure. The night was quiet, the palace glowing softly, and Ethan allowed himself a small smile. They had survived today. They had proven strength, adaptability, and courage. And tomorrow, as always, the future would demand more. But for now, humans had triumphed, and Ethan, husband of a queen, stood ready to face all that the galaxy could throw at them.